So hello, this is new because I'm using my new camera which I got 2 weeks ago. For those of you who have been following my channel, you may recall that I used to use film cameras by Sony and Panasonic to film all of my playthroughs, etc. Of board games. And when we're playing RPGs, of course, we use Zoom and webcams. So we'll see, excuse me, how this works, because I have no idea what the sound is like on this one. And I hope that I'm in focus, because I can't tell. So today we're going to dive back into a book review. This time it's not dark academia, although the book that I'm going to talk to you about today is the second in a series of 3 books. The Alex Stern trilogy. The third one hasn't even been announced, so it's not coming out 2024. Leigh Bardugo is going to put out a book in 2024 called The Familiar, which is set in an entirely different time and place. So today I'm going to talk about Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo, which is the second part in the Alex Stern trilogy. And it pretty much picks up where the first book, Ninth House, leaves off. In the first book, and if you want to know what this is about, you can go and watch my other video on it. And oh, by the way, there's going to be spoilers galore. So if you don't want to know what happens in this book, you should turn off the video now, unless you want me to tell you what I think you should do. You should read this book if you liked the first book and if you liked the characters in the book. If you are looking for a dark academia book, this is not it. If you are looking for something that is more like magical and a lot more sinister and dark with regard to the plot unfolding, and more of a university backdrop, you shouldn't be reading this, because you're not getting any of this in this book. But of course, if you're a completionist and you say, I don't care, I just want to finish the series, then of course, by all means, buy this book. And that is not to say that I dislike this book. I think it's a good book. I enjoyed reading it. I finished it in about 3 days. Mind you, working days, so it means I couldn't read during the day because I was working. And it is really well written. However, it's got its drawbacks. I would say it's not as good as Ninth House, but it's a good book. So what is it about? Again, we're dealing with Alex Stern, the protagonist from the first book, and it pretty much picks up where we left off. Darlington is still vanished. We don't know where he is, but we do have kind of an idea that he's in hell. And basically, Sandow is dead, and at the moment, the situation is a bit involved, because the other societies that were deeply involved in all of the goings-on around Tara's death and trying to establish a new nexus for St. Elmo's, but then the other society also letting in townies into their portal, travel, etc. Everything that was dealt with in the previous book is unresolved, because none of the societies have actually had their comeuppance. It's like, you know, maybe a slip on the wrist, but none of them got suspended. It's all business as usual. And basically, Alex wants to find Darlington and bring him back, and of course, Pamela wants to help her as well, because of course she is deeply in love with Darlington. And so the two of them decide to do a ritual by finding their way into one of the tombs of one of the societies. They perform a ritual and it goes terribly awry. Horses from hell, and I really mean hell horses, come out of a crack that they have created through the veil and or into the underworld. The veil is something different here. And they managed to wrangle them in and send them back, but basically the tomb has taken some damage, and they return to their own house, and they know that this is now going to be, it's going to look very bad on their resume, because not only have they managed to get into one of the tombs without consent of the tomb owners, they have said that they were going to do an inspection when in fact they were doing a ritual, so that's all very sketchy. But it turns out when they go back to Darlington's home, the mansion, where they go to feed the cat Cosmo, and to look after the mail, and to kind of pretend that he's in Spain, so somebody needs to look after the house because at some point he will return. They discover that Darlington has in fact returned, and he's now a horned demon that's kind of caught in a circle in the ballroom in his mansion and can't get out. But he's kind of semi-conscious, so you can talk to him. He's very charming, as demons are. He's also fully naked, so I'm pretty sure that Pamela appreciates that. And he basically wants out. And it's clear that, or they assume that his soul was split into two, and that the good part, the human part, is still somewhere in hell, and this is the demonic part that has managed to come to Earth. But he's trying to cling on to this last scrap of humanity that he brought back with him, and he's trying not to let the demon overtake him. And he's also bound by the circle, so he cannot actually leave, or that's what they believe. And basically the story then follows the two of them, and they enlist the help of Mercy, and also Turner returns. So Mercy is the girl that was basically went viral with her kind of sexual abuse video that was created by Blake when she was under the influence of this manifest glamour drug, but she's not part of Lethe, but she's kind of co-opted into it, and she really wants to fight bad things, and she really dislikes the societies now. She knows that magic now exists, and she really wants a part of the action. So we've got Turner, we've got Dawes, we've got Alex Stern, and they realize that what they need to do is they need to use something called the gauntlet in order to breach the gap, or bridge the gap I should say, between this world and the underworld, basically hell, and that they can do this. And they research the ritual, and it turns out you need 4 killers killed someone, and essentially you have Alex, who's killed multiple people. You've got Dawes, who killed Blake while defending Alex. You've got Turner, who's also a killer. We find out later in the book for each of them how it actually happened. Not for Alex, because we already know. And we have we need a 4th person. And they find Trip Helmuth. Now Trip Helmuth is a frat boy and a society member from book 1. He makes an appearance. He's kind of a little bit of a dopey guy. He is kind of nice but not too nice, kind of intelligent but not too intelligent, kind of good looking but not too good looking, but above all he is very old money. And he's just part of the society that he was a part of because it was the thing to do. And it turns out that he didn't graduate. He walked with his class, which I find is really interesting. Apparently you can pretend to graduate but not graduate because he doesn't have enough credits, and his dad has essentially cut him off. So he now spends his time in the tomb of his former society, whose keys he hadn't returned. He said he'd lost them, and apparently he's such a dope that everybody thinks, yeah, that's probably correct, he's so stupid he would do that. And then he raids the fridge of that society at night to just keep going. And they find him, and basically when it's all about we need a killer, he's like, yeah, well, I'm game, I'm a killer. And everyone's like, what, you? And basically then they decide to create the gauntlet, and I'm really condensing the story now into a couple of sentences. So essentially there is a whole ritual. They have to basically walk around a quad, as we say in England, or in the United Kingdom. So they have quads in university, so I don't know what you call them. I think it's a I don't actually know what she calls it here, but it's kind of like inside a library, so an exposed part of the library. It's like a yard, a garden. And they have to basically walk around it. There's blood sacrifice involved, and so on and so forth. And they essentially have to die. And they have to have somebody to watch over their bodies while their spirits make the transition. And they and Mercy says, okay, she's going to do it. And they give her salt armor and salt swords to basically keep the bad vibes and the greys and so on and so forth at bay. And then they do it, and there we have a nice change of perspective, because the only two characters in the first book that got a perspective of their own were, of course, Alex and Darlington. So in this book now we get different perspectives. We get the perspective of Turner, and we find out how he came to be a killer. We get the perspective of Tripp and find out how he came to be a killer. And we get the perspective of what Dawes felt when she actually killed Blake. So the POVs are now more diverse than they were in the first book. And then basically they cross over, things go awry. They find Darlington, who's basically lifting stones and putting them on a pile. So obviously we all remember Sisyphus. He was rolling up a stone in hell, up a mountain, and whenever he reached the top or almost reached the top, it would roll down again. He would have to do it again and again and again. So here again you have hell is repetition. He just keeps doing this. But the four don't manage to free him. They are assaulted by wolves, and there's a fight, and they manage to get back. However, throughout this story and through the POV scenes, each one of them suddenly feels something furry with a heartbeat in their hands. And it all seems like they have a rabbit. And this is where, of course, this picture comes into the frame, because this is Babbitt Rabbit, and he later returns as a ginormous rabbit, like 8 feet tall, blah blah blah, and he's kind of like really mean and dangerous. But apparently it turns out, and this is my first gripe that I have with this book, Babbitt Rabbit is a rabbit that Helly and Alex bought while they were still staying with Len, and apparently Len and Helly and Betcher decided to see if Betcher's bulldog was going to be game to hunt or play, and they basically sacrificed the rabbit to that dog. And basically there's a scene where then Alex and Helly go and bury the rabbit somewhere, because of course he gets killed. And I'm like, okay, that's unexpected. Not because I hate for the dog to be killed, because I did for the rabbit to be killed, because I did hate for the rabbit to die, but I would have wanted the rabbit not to show up in the first place unless it had been foreshadowed in the first book, because here it comes out of nowhere and I have no idea what it's meant to signify, you know. So just another dead thing that Alex couldn't protect. I mean, we've got Helly, that's bad enough. We don't need the rabbit to boot. So to me, this whole rabbit thing seemed weird. It would have made sense if the rabbit had been there in the first book and it had been already kind of like played out that this was yet another thing that Len took from her. Not only did he take Helly, but previously to that, he had also taken the rabbit. Plus, Helly had been kind of like an accomplice in this whole thing, because she didn't try to prevent the boys from taking the rabbit and feeding it to the dog or making the dog chase it or whatever. So to me that was weird, and I wished he hadn't done it, because it was kind of like out of nowhere. And it's also unclear to me what this rabbit is supposed to symbolize. It could have been anything. She could have used anything, but she decided on the rabbit, and it doesn't make any sense to me, and I find it's off. Anyway, so this rabbit will reappear in the story and basically be a menace and be kind of like a demonic thing. And unfortunately, though, this first ritual where they're trying to rescue him is not only botched because they are chased by those 4 wolves and almost killed, but also because somebody interrupts it, and that is Anselm. Mr. Anselm is a board member of Lethe, and he's supposed to oversee them. They also introduce a new praetor, Professor Walsh Whiteley, who is kind of like the new Sandow, and he comes across as the new Sandow. He's even worse, so he doesn't like women. He doesn't want women to be part of the societies. Then it turns out, of course, that he's gay, and he pines after a young man that he was in love with when they were both young. And I'm not sure if it was unrequited love or if the two of them were together, but basically Alex is on the verge of expulsion, but she basically cashes in on her knowledge, on her ability to read people. Not so much on her ability to see ghosts, but to read people. And she then says, oh yeah, and I see the ghost of a young man, he's standing next to you, blah, blah, blah. And so she basically lies to the professor saying, I see the ghost of your lover or of the person you were in love with. Again, I mean, she's true to her nature because Alex Stern isn't a nice person, so she's going to do whatever it takes to look good. And then Anselm basically, and everything goes badly after that, because then what happens is that we have a break in the narrative, and Eitan, the dealer from book 1, comes back, and because he has basically asked her to do jobs for him, and he gives her money for it, and then he sends her on another job, and she goes to a place somewhere in New Haven, and she encounters a man who apparently owes Eitan 60 grand or something. But it turns out that this guy is a vampire, and that's where I was like, oh really? On top of everything else that's happening, we're now going to throw vampires into the mix? And I was getting really breathless at that stage, and it was kind of like I was running a marathon now, but at sprint speed, because the book became very fast, but too fast for me really. I was like, okay, there's just one too many twists at this stage, and I was very unhappy about this vampire thing happening. However, I'll tell you this now. This is Leigh Bardugo, and she knows why she threw in the vampire, and she did it masterfully. Although at the time when I was reading about it, I was like, oh no, not another one, not another complication. So Alex Stern manages to escape using the help of a ghost, in this case an old school teacher in her 60s, who knows all about the vampire and says, yeah, we know that he's there, we don't go to his house, and he has buried hundreds of people in his backyard, because he basically sucks them dry. And then the story goes on, and suddenly Helly appears, and all of the other people that have been important to Turner and so on and Dawes appear, and it turns out that those 4 wolves are actually demons, and they've brought them into the world when they botched the ritual the second time. And here we have the arc connecting the main plot with the vampire side plot, because it turns out that a vampire is a demon and they feed on emotions, and he happens to drink blood. And then the plot thickens, because it turns out that this guy, this vampire, used to be a member of one of the societies, and he was one who went through the gauntlet when the gauntlet was first formed early in the 20th century. And he brought back a demon with him that sucked him dry and took his place. And now it becomes clear that these 4 demons, these 4 hellhounds or hellwolves that they brought with them, are going to try and kill them, suck them dry, and replace them. And then become demonic entities in this world and are going to basically go about merrily killing people. And when Alex goes back to the home of Darlington, she finds his parents. They've been killed. She sees their ghosts. There's the bodies, but she also finds the husk of Mr. Anselm, because it turns out that Anselm is no longer Anselm. When they first opened the portal and brought the hell horses out, they also brought a demon out. And this demon basically took Mr. Anselm, sucked him dry, and took his form, and has been trying to play a game with Alex. There's also been 2 deaths on campus, which he created. So he basically got somebody to kill them. That's a different side plot that I'm not going to go into, but it makes sense. It makes perfect sense in the story. To distract them from the actual idea of bringing back Darlington. And so now they have a fully fledged incarnated demon, namely Anselm. They've got a second one, namely the vampire, Linus. And then they also have the 4 other demons that have been coming after them. So the stakes are again a lot higher, because suddenly they have enemies again on all sides. Interestingly enough, Walsh Whiteley turns out to be not so bad after all. He's a stickler for the rules, he doesn't like women, but hey, as long as you do your job and Lethe oversees the rituals of the others, he doesn't care. And so, to cut a long story short, they go back to hell one more time, and basically take Darlington with them, because Trip is missing. Trip is gone. They don't know where he is. They believe that he was probably killed by his demon. And, so basically they need a 4th killer, and of course Darlington is one, so they basically decide to do it again. They go back, they manage to come back, they manage to sort of bring him back, but he's kind of different now, and now he's bound to Alex. So now we have a situation that Darlington is back. He's no longer a complete demon. He's kind of semi-demonic. He is powerful. He has preternatural powers, and also Alex is now able, in connection with him, to bring forth hellfire, and they are now a demon kick-ass team. And they have sidekicks, namely Turner and Dawes. They also neatly kill Eitan and send him to hell in exchange for Darlington. It all makes sense when you read it on the page. But it also means that Mercy is suddenly kind of moving away from Alex, because, she's now been part of this and she's killed somebody, and she's not down with that. She's not very happy about this, which I understand. I just hope that she will get back to it and will get back to Alex, because I would like Alex to have a friend who's not part of the whole Lethe setup, because of course Turner is part of the Lethe setup, because he's the Centurion, he's the official liaison between Lethe and the police. And they vanquish Anselm, so that's neatly tied up. Eitan is killed, that's neatly tied up. And then they find Trip, and Trip has actually been assaulted and killed by his demon. But when they were trying to find ways to ward off the demons, they all created little salt talismans, which became part of them. So for Alex, it's for Turner, it's a tree, and for Alex, it's a snake. For Darlington, it's Cosmo, but he never actually gets it. They just created it, but I don't think he's ever given it in the book. For Trip, it's an albatross. And it turns out that the albatross did try to prevent the demon from getting, but when it didn't work because the demon was too strong, it preserved his soul. So we now have a vampire Trip who is dead, undead, whatever you want to call it. He really wants to eat everybody, and he actually says so, but he's got a human soul. So it's like Angel in Buffy. So that's the end of the situation and the story, and this is what we have now. And we see that there is an airborne demon at the end of the book that's trying to attack them, and that's where the book ends. So we know that there are demons. We know Trip is one, but he's a good one. We have kind of like a semi-demonic tied to and bound by Alistair and Darlington. We have a Dawes who's basically come out of her shell. We've got a Turner who's ready to vanquish evil, and we've got a Mercy who's somewhere on the side. So that's the end of where we're at. So now it's like a Scooby Gang thing. So now it kind of reminds me of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where you've got like the different types of people, with Alex definitely being the Vampire Slayer, the Demon Slayer, you know, and Darlington being the Buffy, being the Angel sidekick, and so on, or later the Spike sidekick. Which is also why I would say this is not Dark Academia anymore. This is an action fantasy book, which is really well written. It's fun to read. But if you're looking for Dark Academia, I cannot recommend it as such, because you wouldn't be getting what you think you might be. So that is Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. I really liked it. It reads very quickly. It does get convoluted at times, and there were some times when I was really like, I'm not following the plot at all, but that was probably just me and not her style of writing, because she manages to tie all of the loose ends together, and even the things where you're like, oh my god, there's a side plot, please, not another side plot, like you find it in Dead Zone by Stephen King. Yes, it's a side plot, but it makes perfect sense, and she ties them all up neatly into a bunch. So Leigh Bardugo, Hellbent. I would say if I was going to go with a star rating, it's 3.5 to 4. Talk to you soon. Bye.